Marjorie Taylor Greene has tweeted that there's Jewish lasers that are attacking people and the such. Like, certain things are just a bit crazy. Like, you can't really have these types of things just go out, especially if this is an elected official. Like, I actually don't mind that she was censored on Twitter. Like, you don't believe a lot of the stuff she says.
No,
as an intelligent person.
I've had Marjorie Taylor Greene. What was reported about the Jewish space lasers comment? But you're going to enter that into evidence. Do you know exactly what she said?
Sure. Hold on a second.
I've had conversations with her where I don't remember the exact words, but I remember I have a memory of her implying that whatever was reported was cartoonishly taken out of context, and either she was joking or it was something like it was kind of unrelated.
She was talking about the fires, and she blamed them on Jewish space lasers.
What's the exact quote she said? She blamed fires on Jewish space lasers?
It's a very long post. It's from November 17, 2018. There are now over 70 people confirmed dead, over 1,000 missing in the California fires. Okay, then there were all these people who said they saw what looked like lasers or blue beams of light causing the fires, and pictures and videos. I don't know anything about it, but I do find it really curious about the PG&E partnership. The idea of clean energy to replace, the idea is clean energy to replace coal and oil. If they're beaming the sun's energy back to Earth, I'm sure they couldn't ever miss a transmitter receiving a station, right? Mistakes. Hold on a second. Is there a different tweet?
No, I think that people put those words in her mouth.
Hold on a second. Hold on.
I doubt that she would seriously, even if that phrase was used, I would imagine it would be like some tongue-in-cheek sort of almost, take the air out of the room a little bit with some of the, kind of tense implications of a laser theory causing a fire. But yeah. I don't know that she even
right. So I'm sure about this is what it's inferring right here. A laser beam or light beam coming down to Earth, I guess, could cause a fire. I don't know. I hope not. That wouldn't look like so good for PG&E. Rothschild Incorporated, Solera, or Jerry Brown, who sure does seem fond of PG&E. I guess she's referring that the Rothschilds are somehow tied to these space lasers. But I see what you're saying. She's not exactly saying it, but there is sort of.
It's. So you think an elected representative, a sitting member of Congress, chairwoman of a congressional subcommittee around oversight should be permanently banned from access to all of her constituents, the American nation she represents and reports to, because of a non-committal, curious, preliminary hypothesis about lasers and fires, and an offhand reference to bankers who are affiliated with the Rothschilds? Vlad, have you ever said anything online? If I'm going to permanently ban you, you've never been curious about, you're curious about something going on with a label, and or you're curious about who may have assassinated, shot up some musician or something, and you're not sure what happened. You're having to speculate. You don't necessarily trust the authorities on what's been published on it. Investigations were cut short, or it's a very sparse record, but some people, you got some circumstantial evidence. You have some experience in the industry. You're exploring some hypothesis. You put it out there that you're doing that, and that might have implications for something. For example, who killed a particular musician or how did someone die may have implications for U.S. national security. There are people who go out there and say things like, was the CIA involved in killing Tupac Shakur? Well, look at what that might do. If that hypothesis were to be believed, we might lose the Pan-African hip-hop community, or in Latin America, the Caribbean, the Sahel, Sub-Saharan Africa, to Russian or Chinese influence, because they all hate the U.S. government because they think the CIA is behind everything, because some BS theory that Vlad spread on his multi-million your subscriber account YouTube channel. In the interest of what you said is false or unsubstantiated, it sounds a little bit crazy. You didn't provide enough receipts to really substantiate it, and it could potentially have blowback on very real U.S. national security, and soft power influence, and a Russian and Chinese political party may rise to power, and foreign politicians may be blasting your misinformation YouTube video about who killed Tupac Shakur to millions of people on a big screen event in Nairobi next month, and you've just forfeited. I think of how many Americans are going to die because this extremist group backed by the Chinese swung to power because of your misinformation video. So bye-bye to your entire business, Vlad. Bye-bye to everything you've built over, 10, 15 years. Like everything that you've built, ground up, boom. Do you want someone to have that power over you, Vlad?
Look, I mean, ironically enough, I helped solve the Tupac murder case by bringing in one of the people involved in the murder. But I think the way Twitter handles it, where if there is a statement from a prominent person that starts to really get a lot of traction and it potentially is false or misleading, that it gets referenced, that this tweet potentially has a problem, and here's another piece of information that you could cross-reference. Do I believe that Marjorie needs to be banned? No. I also don't believe that Trump needed to be permanently banned. I just felt at that moment it was a dangerous time. At that very moment, it was a dangerous time. Now, if they would have given his account back a week later, I would have been okay with that also. I don't believe in a permanent ban. But you also can't have a situation where you have a potential for a serious insurgence where a lot of people are going to lose their lives, their freedom, and so forth. People lost their lives during the Capitol 6 riot.
Oh, Trump supporters did.
Police did.
No. You're going to talk about Officer Brian Sicknick? What was it?
It was a heart attack, right?
Yeah.
One of the cops had a heart attack?
Well, but there was no homicide. If you beat someone and they have a heart attack.
No, there was not a homicide. That is correct.
No, you can't put that on Trump supporters. There was no one.
I think if you cause a riot of that stature and someone has a heart attack who's trying to protect the situation, I think those two situations go together.
And you're just legally flat wrong. There were two people who were charged. No, there were two people. I broke this story around the blood libel with Brian Sicknick because they tried to hold that up for months. And two people were charged because of a pepper spray incident that had happened sometime around 3 p.m. that day. And they were charged initially with a kind of like assault type charge because some of the pepper spray from a distance had gotten on Sicknick, and they were trying to launch that into a homicide charge until the autopsy came out.
Actually, I think you're right, because the police officer died from a stroke the day after the attack.
Yes. And
so he was assaulted, but he was assaulted the day before by rioters and collapsed. So you could actually hold one. I'm going to hold on to what I'm saying. He was assaulted, and the next day he died.
No. What was the assault? Did you see the video of the assault? Okay. Well, I did, and I published all about it. It's in Revolver News. Okay. And there were communications with him and his family. This is like this is hours after the event. Mm-hmm. When he started feeling that he had, been sick or whatever. It was months after they withheld. It was really funny the way the autopsy, the struggle to actually get public awareness about the autopsy, because they used Officer Sicknick's death as a way to sneak in the word fatal, like what you'll see from like January 2021. If you run a Boolean search in Google and you set like before July 2021, like you'll see they were always using that fatal January 6th. And everyone said, well, where's the autopsy? Because they were making this sound like a homicide. And if they could show any causal relationship between what was done by the two folks who were initially charged with the assault on camera, apparent assault, this was basically like pepper spray from a very, very far distance. You don't think the Merrick Garland Justice Department would have tried a homicide charge if they could prove that there was any relation whatsoever, that what you're saying is true?
I see what you're saying. You're right. You know more about the story than I do. You're absolutely right.
The January 6th stuff is complicated. And like, I don't want to get too bogged down in that because, look, I understand there was a really high power media campaign around January 6th stuff. And it unlocked a lot of government powers in terms of what was done in the aftermath of that. And if you, like, to understand the kind of cinematic universe of that is there's just a lot of different moving parts between the national security state, all the different stakeholders in the civil society and advertising and social media space. Like, I only brought up this is another thing, by the way. I mean, I should note that it is a little curious that the Transition Integrity Project that I mentioned, who was set up to try to find a way to have Biden installed as president, even if Trump won, in June 2020, as part of the simulation that John Podesta personally role-played Joe Biden in, and then John Podesta was promoted to run the $374 billion climate slush fund for the Biden White House. So instead of being in prison for this, he was promoted to, a third of $1 trillion crony climate fund. But one of the things that is in this, and I'll send you the receipt, you can put it on screen. This was published in mainstream media reporting. One of their plans in their war game simulation is a plan to, quote, induce a breakdown on January 6th in order to stop the vote from going through and make the alternate election so that Trump would not be certified on election day, so that there would be this kind of crisis moment. There'd be a constitutional crisis around Trump's legitimacy because he didn't win the popular vote. And at the time, they're making a big deal about, there's not really a legitimate election unless, this is why D.C. has to be made a state. And we need to get rid of the Electoral College. We have these Harvard law professors talking about ending the Electoral College. And this same network had a plan in place and war gamed it with the highest levels of both political parties. Part of the Transition Integrity Project was Donna Brazile, the former head of the DNC, Michael Steele, the former head of the RNC, but never Trump Republican. High-level military, intelligence, statecraft, and political operatives on both sides of the aisle, the Bush-Clinton wing of it, they had an explicit plan to invoke a breakdown on January 6th, 5 months before that. Now, again, what I'm saying here is the picture is very complicated, and we can go through all the networks there, but just to get it back on the censorship thing, whatever you think of the January 6th event, you have this censorship industrial complex, which sometimes uses a national security predicate like, domestic extremism, as with January 6th, but will sometimes do it on like energy policy, what you can say about climate change. The Disinformation Governance Board that was set up in 2022 had a section for policing speech about the Ukraine conflict. When you have this, you can always find a reason to say that any narrative that is of any consequence whatsoever to public policy will have an effect on U.S. national interests or U.S. national security. What you say about climate change, Russia uses fossil fuels disproportionately. Part of the clean energy push is because it would help bankrupt Russia. If you get people off of oil and you get people using renewables, this was seen as a way of basically depriving Russia of its main economic powerhouse, starting in the early 2000s when Russia started using, gas diplomacy and leveraging Europe's dependence on Russian oil and like. So if you are against climate change, you're pro-Putin. You can make that argument. And you can say, look at how many people are going to die in Ukraine because of your policy, your speech about climate policy. And you can do this with pretty much anything. And if you give the government the power to do that, I don't want the Trump admin to have this power. This is like one of these, like the ring. They have to, in Lord of the Rings, they throw it into the fires of Mordor and instead of Frodo keeping it, because it's a God button. Whoever holds that can stay in power forever. And frankly, I'd think if Elon hadn't bought X, and if Biden wasn't reliant on Elon in many ways, because Elon's a very unique figure in this, and we can maybe segue to that, but it wasn't just that someone bought Twitter who had a different political orientation. It's that Elon is, the national security state is dependent on Elon in many respects. SpaceX, all of our, if the CIA wants to, use the telecommunications and GPS and to track, you can bet it's going to be from a SpaceX satellite. Something like two-thirds of all satellites in orbit are from Elon Musk's SpaceX company, which itself grew out of, State Department diplomatic endeavors to be able to get the initial missiles and ballistics for SpaceX to be able to do. And they, built on government contracts with the U.S. military, the U.S. State Department, the intelligence services. I mean, even something like Tesla. Tesla was seen as a Democrat company for the longest time. And Elon was associated with Democrats because Tesla was the magic corporate battering ram for American global leadership in the renewable energy space, because the marvel of the innovation of Tesla batteries would make America the global leader in this brand new way of storing energy rather than Russia or China. And when we overthrew the government of Bolivia, Elon even took to Twitter after being criticized because Bolivia is part of this lithium triangle, and one of the things that's required for Tesla batteries is lithium. And Elon said, "We will coup whoever we want." Effectively insinuating that it's actually important to American interests to overthrow a foreign government to get access to lithium to build renewable batteries, so that America can lead in the clean energy space. And Democrats didn't have a problem with that then. And Elon named one of his sons after a CIA project. Right now, as we're doing battle against Russia, it's dependent on Starlink. There are so many ways that it almost took someone from that system. If it was somebody else, if it was someone who had made $100 billion off of a lemonade stand business, and you could just indict him. You just have the Justice Department give him 20 years for premeditated jaywalking. But if you did that to Elon, he could, in theory, shut off Starlink. There goes all your drone warfare in Ukraine. He could theoretically, divest, Tesla to somebody who, wants to go in a completely different direction, or cut off the ability to leverage that for our energy diplomacy. But if you didn't have someone like Elon, you could have had a China system right here, because this censorship industrial complex would stop anybody else from being able to amplify their message, and you have a one-party state.